So you've got about gravel-sized rocks. Next step is the pulverizer. And so I'm going to work you through everything from the safety at the beginning to running it to cleaning it. This machine has just been cleaned, so when you want to see the cleaning procedure, go to the end of the video. First thing to understand is do not work around these wheels unless the breaker is thrown in the back here. Always make sure that breaker is turned off if you're going to work without the shields near the wheels without the plate in it. We'll show you exactly what that is later in the video. But it's basically ready to be put back together so we can run our sample. So the first thing is we're going to put on this giant wheel shield. The handle that you see here in the front actually aims towards the back of the machine. So we'll spin that around. And these little collars that you see here actually drop into the front of the machine. This won't fit unless you've brought the wheels together, so make sure wheels are almost touching and then this will slide in place. All right, with that in place, next we need the tower. So here's the tower. This is where the feeder of the hopper is going to be dumping sample in. So you spin that around 180 so it's aiming back that way. Drop that into the wheel protectors and you're ready to roll. Last thing we got to do is attach the hopper and make sure it's not going to move around. To attach the hopper, you need these little pins and you need to be able to basically maneuver this thing. So now you can see the feeder ramp is going inside the tower. And once you do that, you're going to actually look down in the back of the hopper here and you're going to line up the holes to drop these pins into. And so it's heavy, sometimes you got to slam it just to make little adjustments, but when you do that, the two pins, they're usually sitting back on the power switch, drop right into place. Next thing you got to do is tighten this back wheel forward onto the other wheel. Front wheel runs on bumpers, so when you hit something big, the front wheel will bounce out, and it's this back wheel adjustment that really determines how you process one of these samples. And so this is the little handle wheel, almost looks like a sailboat steer, and you don't want to go very tight with that. You literally want the wheels to touch and maybe another quarter turn, or you get the machine to literally beat itself apart. So not very tight, and then you're going to grab the chain, and then you're going to grab the chain that's basically sitting on the hopper speed box, and you're going to wrap it from the lower cog on this wheel around this frame, and then just use this simple little bolt. Wrap your chain around, then you have this little bolt with a wing nut, and this is what's going to keep the wheels tight as it's vibrating and smashing rocks. Doesn't need to be super tight, just needs to keep this chain taut and keep this wheel from turning or backing out. Next thing, wash out a bucket really well, get a brand new garbage bag, and this is going to be the liner that holds your samples, so you want to make sure it's very clean. Once your bag is inside, have a good amount of it hanging out over the rim, and then you're going to put it up in the machine, and so basically the tower that you see above is going to connect all the pulverized sample and have it drop straight into the bucket. So to do that, you lean the bucket forward till it hits that tower, and then it can basically slide up under that tower. A lot of people will actually try and tape this bag either to the tower or to the bucket, but these are big garbage bags, so if you have enough of it hanging out, even if sample pulls some in as it's falling in, you'll be all right. But if you're a little unsure, then go ahead and make sure you tape this bag to something. I've never had an issue, and that's just because I make sure a lot of it's already hanging out in case some of it gets pulled in as the sample falls. Then we have this big plastic flap. This goes on the end, basically, so when you're running a vacuum, all the dust goes out, it doesn't float away. And so, piece of tape, preferably duct tape, and if you tape it on there vertically like that, it allows this to move a little bit side to side without tearing your tape. Now that the whole machine is basically covered and ready to roll, we can turn it on. So this is your giant pulverizer breaker. You'll see here it says pulverizer, and that's the machine we want to run. So we throw it up to the on position. Okay, it's time to load the sample. So all we're gonna do is climb up the ladder and dump it into this hopper. So here you can see a pretty coarse fraction. This stuff is fine going through the pulverizer, but something like that is not gonna do us any favors. And so make sure that if you're gonna be running this stuff through the jaw crusher first, something that big gets rerun and recrushed. Everything else here should pulverize just fine. The key to pouring your sample into this whole system is you want to get it down to the bottom of this funnel because you don't want things shooting down the ramp and falling into the wheels before they're running. So you can either do this while the machine is running, and then you're going to deal with more loudness, or you just do this carefully, reaching all the way down in before you let go of the sample, and therefore it doesn't go shooting down the ramp. Before you turn on the machine, you want to run the vacuum system. So before you do that, there's this breaker that's on the north side of the rock room, and it's just this little switch down below. And that turns on the big blue vacuum up in the ceiling. Last things you do before you turn on the machine is open up this vent. So you want the handle to be in line with the pipe. That means that the flume is now open. I like to open up both sides. The side over here for the jaw crusher and this side here for the pulverizer. You just need a little bit of airflow to keep the dust out of the room. Too much though and you'll actually be sucking away your really fine zircons and your fine dust. So if you open up both sides, no dust in the room, and you don't suck out much of your sample away from that tower. The other thing you want to check for is make sure that this back flap behind the machine is dropped down. So if that's open, you're going to get a lot of dust pouring out. And then finally, once this is running, you'll see that if it's running well, no dust comes out. If something's wrong, you'll see dust shooting out of that top tower. And if you see that, make sure either this isn't open or that flap down there is open and it should be closed. Or the top, or that front piece of plastic has fallen away. Then you have right here, this is your hopper speed control. A couple things are important about this. First, there's only one of the power lines connected, but you always want to make sure that it's dangling. And that's because this plug here, if it falls down, it will capture water when you're washing the machine. As soon as that captures water, you go to turn it on the next time, you're going to trip your outlet. That's the GFI interrupter. And so I always like to make sure that that is hung over the machine and therefore no water can get cooled up into that plug and short the whole system out. So before you turn this thing on, you're going to actually turn on the machine. But I'm not going to be able to talk over it, so I want to tell you how you adjust the machine. So literally, the only thing you're going to be adjusting is the feeder here. And you're going to adjust it so it's hitting a single piece of gravel about every half a second. And so the sound you want it running is pa 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 pa. If it's faster than that and it's just going brrr, way too fast, you're not going to get a good separation. And too slow where it's like pa, 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 you're going to wait all day to process a sample. So really you're just adjusting this feeder so you can hear individual pieces of gravel going through the wheels, but not so slow, it's a stall between, and not so fast you hear more than one piece of gravel going through. And so with that said, let's get our earmuffs and get this thing going. All right, so that was the first run. Next thing you want to do is get your sample out and take a look. So just like we put the bucket in, you want to pick it up, tip the bottom out first, making sure not to drop it. The first thing you'll notice is the bag stayed on, didn't have to tape anything, we just had enough hanging out. But now you actually want to look in the bucket. So the first thing you'll notice is there's a bunch of flakes, and so that's like the first run You're going to see a lot of flakes, typically, depending on the rock type. And you're also going to see that it didn't get very fine grained. And so you need to run it through this machine at least twice. If you want to be really thorough, you sieve it down to 450 micron, and what didn't go through the sieve, you put back through this. Because running it 3 times, you can get about 80% down underneath 450 micron. But if you want a thorough processing to go 100% below 450 micron to get just zircon separated, you're going to need to do it more times, but sieve it. You don't want to be running this through over and over and over again without removing the fine fraction, or you're going to be pulverizing that more fine, which you don't want to do. And so we're going to run this through again, see how it looks. As you put your sample back in, you always want to put the top of the bag in first, cradle the bottom of the bag. And as you do this, you got to watch out because there's some bolts here that'll poke your bag and drop your sample. But if you do this correctly, no dust will come out. So you basically want to put top of the bag down in first, make sure it's all towards the bottom of the funnel, and then slowly flip over your sample and then take out the bottom first. And if you do this slow enough, there's absolutely no dust. And in the meantime, if you don't get this method perfected, you should wear a dust mask until you can keep the dust down. So you can already see that a lot of the flakes are gone, but if you feel it, that's about 70% below 450. And this is a pretty good size sample, so you really don't need to sieve it. You really don't need to run it again because it's a granite, so it's going to have tons of zircon. But if you're running something more mafic or super fine grain like a siltstone, you might want to sieve this, and then the things that are bigger than 450, run them back up. Do it again. But this is good enough to throw on the whiffly table or even hand pan if you know how to do it. So that's pretty much the procedure on how to crush, but the most important part of this whole video is how to clean. Because a machine this big has a lot of nooks and crannies, and you want to make sure you get all of those completely washed out before the next sample goes in, just to make sure there's no chance of contamination. Since I'm doing the same sample through all the steps in the rock room, I feel comfortable being able to wash this while the same sample is on the whiffly table. Do not attempt this if different samples are on different machines. Do only one machine with one sample at a time. But since the whiffly is running, I'm going to make sure that I hose everything away from it just to make sure that nothing gets near the whiffly table. First thing I like to do here is do one rinse through with all the covers still in place, just to get rid of most of the dust before I start actually soaping water. Just like washing everything, you start at the top and work your way down. So, doing a light mist into the hopper, strong spray into the tower, and then opening up the back of the machine where the flap is, I can then hose everything out. So I like to hose the bottom of the concrete base along both sides, and then the top. Trying to hit everything underneath there just to knock the dust out. Before you do any work on the pulverizer with the covers off, and you haven't put the safety shield in yet, make sure that you actually throw this breaker. You don't want to be near those wheels if this thing accidentally turns on. So now that everything's been rinsed off, you can pull the pins on the hopper. Got to move it around to get those pins to come out. Then you push the hopper back. Take one of the pins and actually put it underneath the hopper frame. So push up and stick the pin underneath. That'll allow you to actually get everything underneath this hopper frame clean. Then you can pull off the tower. And you set it on the floor because you're going to wash it. And then you can pull off the big wheel cover. With everything rinsed, we can now use a soapy sponge and clean our hopper. So you want to make sure that you get all the way down in this top funnel, and also wipe down the frame as well. Get everything soapy. The soap is actually going to help lift off all the sediment. Just rinsing alone does not get anything clean. It will not get all the sample off. And so soaping down the entire frame, we then get down into the feeder ramp. Try and get underneath the funnel as well. Make sure you cover that entire feeder ramp with the soapy sponge, including underneath the feeder ramp, especially at the lip, because you'll have sediment that wraps its way underneath. Also soap down the base around the hopper. So with everything soaked, we can now rinse the hopper off. With the hopper clean, you can then clean underneath it with that pin in the way. And so that's been soaped, rinsed, and then rinsed again. Then we take the bolt out and get rid of the chain. So chain goes back on the speed control for the feeder. And now we can back out this wheel, and so sometimes this gets stuck, and so we have this ratchet you can actually use on the nut of that wheel and break it loose. Do not force these handles on the wheel. If you force those, you'll break them off and they have to get re-welded. And so if you have to use force, use the ratchet. We can now spin the back roller away. So you want a decent space with that. Before we scrub the wheels, I want to make sure that I get everything rinsed just to get all that dust out of here. And so what we're trying to do is rinse underneath both wheels, and we're also trying to go on the outside of the frame because there's a ledge down here that we definitely want to make sure we get all the sediment out, and there's a similar ledge in the back. And so the key is to work every angle with the nozzle to try and get it all out. So starting with the wheels, I work right on the edge of the wheels because there's this tower underneath of them. So I do both sides of that. And I also work underneath the wheels, both on this front side and down on the back side. And then again, like where we saw the ledge in the front, we want to get behind the screw that pushes that wheel in. And you can hear that I'm actually hitting the tower down below. So the challenge here is just to work every angle with the nozzle. Getting the sides of the wheels, sides of the tower, and then also down in here there's another space, and that's the ledge that always catches sediment. That's the ledge that I can always tell if somebody cleaned it correctly or incorrectly. In violation of my whole top-down cleaning procedure, once I've done the best I can to spray everything down just as rinse, I then like to also rinse out the inside of this. And so that's kind of a double feature, because what I'm trying to do is knock all of the old dust off of this, but also get as much out of this tower as I can before I make the whole top clean. And so basically, start by hosing down the sides. And you have two little gussets up in the corners, and so you not only have to get it from this angle, like I am there, but I also have to reach in and get it from behind. And so those are the two little gussets that are up on top. But then I also spray up to get the top sealing in the back. And then I hose around the back plate that's on the back vent. Then I hose both the inside and the outside of this tower. And this is going to go out of the machine and then rain down on you. So it's going to suck. So I go inside of the tower. And now you can see that I'm getting soaked. And then I go on the outside of the tower. And then I come all the way forward. And so I'm trying to get underneath this little front plate here. But then you also have to go under and then up on top because there's that ledge that we hit from above. And now we got to get it from below. And so you reach in front of the tower and you know you're hitting that ledge if you see that water coming out. So in front of the tower and then back toward yourself. And so that's that nasty ledge that can collect sediment. And then when you're done, if you feel up in there, you know, make sure that there's no sediment in there. With this whole area rinsed, we can now scrub it with a wire brush using soap and water. So with the wheels apart, we put in this little protective shield. So that drops between the rollers, and that allows you to get in here with a wire brush with no fear of getting your arm ripped off. So with that in place, we then turn the machine back on. And this is when we actually work with the machine running. With the safety shield in between the wheels, we can now get a wire brush, our sponge for soap, eye protection. We can throw the breaker and we can turn the machine on. I know this is a scary part of the deal, but with this plate in, you'll be all right. Even though we have that safety in, I like to do one more thing to make sure I don't get near the pinch zone. And that is, I lock my arm on this frame here, and that's my pivot point. And so this arm keeps me from moving anywhere near the pinch point. The other thing I do is I only work on the back side of these wheels. So I work away from the pinch point on this wheel, and then I work forward of the pinch point on the back wheel. So to do that, we put a little bit of soap on our wheels. You don't want to be in line with the wheel, you want to be off to the side because you saw that it just kicks up a bunch of suds. And then working on the back side of that wheel, I then use the wire brush to clean off all of the old sample. So that cleans the face of the wheels. And then we have these little toilet brushes to do the sides. So I dip this brush in soapy water. And I make sure to get the sides of the wheels and the shafts. So with the front wheel done, I throw soap on the back wheel. And again, I work forward to the pinch point, so I get as far forward as I can, so I stay away from the middle of those wheels. And I'm working with a straight arm here, so even if I get pushed out, it pushes me away from the pinch point. So I work that whole back area there. So with that scrubbed, I now do the sides with this toilet brush. And the back shaft. And if that's not torturous enough, you need to do this twice. So rinse it off, do it again. So second time, putting soap on the front wheel. Using the wire brush away from the pinch zone. Because the cool thing is if you're working down here and it pulls you up and away from the pinch zone. So you're just trying to stay as far away from the middle as possible. See right there, I wanted to go up, but it just took me away because I'm braced with my arm on the frame. So we did the top, now we do the sides. Sides in the shaft. Sides in the shaft. soap up the back. And again, work as far away from the pinch zone as you can. So we did the top, now we're going to do the sides. Hose it down, and now the wheels are clean. And I want to do a second hosing of everything around those wheels. And the real challenge here is trying to get every angle with this nozzle. Getting both sides of the wheels, from the sides of that tower down there, on the inside, then on the outside. So you do that on both sides here. So sides of the wheels, sides of the inside of the tower, then sides of the outside of the tower. And then try and also get back here behind the wheel on the inside, and then out behind the screw side. Now that the top end has been soaked up, we come to the bottom and do some soap. So you don't have to climb into the entire machine, but you want to reach back to at least where the sample bucket stands. And you want to soak down the sides. And you want to soak down that tower on the outside, including the back. And then on the inside. And this tower is key. So you literally want to get as far up into that tower and make sure you hit it with a soapy sponge. If you don't knock it off the sponge, you're going to leave old sediment there for the next sample. So reaching way up in there, I can actually feel the little flaps in there that help catch sediment. So now we've cleaned the inside of the chute, the outside of the chute. We do this ridge, we do the sealing all the way around, including behind the chute. And so now that it's all soaked up, we can rinse it off. Including the sealing around the entire chute, and then that nasty ledge again. Last thing I like to do before drying is basically hose off the concrete base and make sure it goes all the way back out that back flap. With ear protection and eye protection, turn the air hose on, and you're basically going to blow off all the water on the frame. Then inside the hopper. And if you're going to want to use this right away, you want to blow off all the water. But if you're just going to leave it for the next people, you can do it kind of quickly, but just make sure you blow off all the big water droplets. Basically working around and around. And then blowing off all the water off the chute. And then next are the wheels. Okay, rinse off the wheel guard. You want to hold this up in a way that there's no flat ledges, everything is vertical. Rinse all the little nooks out, then hit it with a sponge. Wash both the inside and the outside. Give it a good rinse down. And where it was actually touching the floor, I like to pick it up at the end and rinse off whatever touched the floor. And now we can go set this aside on a clean table. Next, clean the tower. And to do that, I like to hold the hose up in it while it's vertical. To rinse it out. And flip it over and make sure you get the sponge in there. Make sure all of the inside surface is wiped with that sponge. Then the outside surface. And then turn it back over and give it a rinse out. Trying to keep it as vertical as possible so everything falls straight out of there. So rinse off the outside, and then finally rinse off what touched the floor. And then this can be set basically inside the wheel covers. And this outer flap can essentially just be rinsed off. So rinse off both sides of it. And then you can set it basically on top of the machine to cover it after it's been all clean and dried. That's pretty much the whole procedure. And so make sure that you've thrown the breaker in the back, that's off. We've blown off all the things that could be damaged by rust, and the rest can just drip dry. And remember, you actually want to clean this first, like we just saw, unless you're totally sure the person before you cleaned it correctly. And that's most likely only you. So in this drawer by the door, we have a logbook. So you can see that basically in this logbook, we're writing down everything that's been done in here. But you also notice that sometimes people come in and they don't log in. That's a huge no-no. And so we've done two things today. We both used the pulverizer with the same sample and the whiffling table. So we're going to log this in the book. Before you leave the rock room, make sure you hose down all the floors, any of the stools or ladders that you use, and make sure you get all the sediment into the drain down in the middle. Next procedure, whiffling table.